Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So we're excited about this training today. We have a chunk of our core team here with us and also some EMIS team members. So a lot of information to cover that we think will be helpful for everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started, but we have Lindsay, Meredith, and Margie from the core team will be presenting. And then on the EMIS side, we have Helen and Alexandra with us. So as you can see here, just an overview of what we are going to cover today. As you can see, there are a lot of pieces and parts to attendance, and many of those pieces and parts interact with each other. So it's very important on the setup side of things that you have everything as you intend it to be so that attendance does calculate correctly for you. All right, so starting off, we'll look at code categories. So these are usually set by your district, even though they're set up within the building. The district typically decides these. Usually you'll just see the three basic that we have here. So the excused, tardy, and unexcused. And then moving over, we have our attendance codes. So you'll see the top line there has the present code. It looks a little different. There's no code listed or category listed, and that's because PowerSchool just assumes a default present. So if no attendance is marked for a student, then they are counted as present. So starting on the left side there with the codes, you can have multiple characters if you turn that on within your attendance preferences, but we recommend keeping that to 2 or 3 at most just to keep things simple for your staff. But you do have in the next column there the description, so you can add a description for each of the codes, and then keep in mind that those descriptions will show up on my PowerHub. So when the students and guardians look at attendance, they can see basically the explanation of what that code is. The next column there is teachers assigned. So any code that has a green check mark, the teachers can assign that to students when taking attendance. Again, we recommend keeping this simple and limiting it to just a few codes because the teachers, they won't necessarily know if, a parent called in, if the student is sick, the specifics of the absence. So if they just, mark them if they're absent or tardy, and then the office will go back and further clarify what the absence was. On the next column, you have your code categories. So again, those are just referring to the categories in the screenshot on the right. So each of your codes, other than that present code, will be assigned to a category. The points column on this page isn't something that you need to worry about. That one doesn't matter. But you do want to make sure that you have the counts ADA, counts ADM marked. And then in the right column, each code will need to be designated as a present or an absent code. Great. And then this screenshot here is if we clicked on that U unexcused code, just showing the details there so you can see all of that information that is on the overview page. This is where you can make those adjustments. So setting the code, the description, is it a present or an absent code? What category does it fall into? Again, the points here you don't need to worry about. You can mark, can teachers assign this code? There is the setting there to lock attendance record when the administrator has entered it. So you'll want to mark that on codes. Once the administrator admin team has marked something, then a teacher can't go back and overwrite that. You have your boxes there to check for ADA and ADM, and then you can adjust the sort order if desired. And then you'll see here we have the Ohio State information banner. So this is very important EMIS information, and I'll let Helen share some more about that.
Okay, so down at the bottom of your attendance codes, you'll see the Ohio State information. These have evolved over the years as Ohio reporting requirements have changed. PowerSchool has also changed to accommodate that. So today, this is what we're left with. The top box is used when a code can be associated with partial days of attendance. So not a full day, but if they're tardy or out for a few hours, checking that box is what prompts the time in, time out clock to appear when you're actually taking attendance. So, there's a couple things you can check. If you see that popping up on codes that are only meant for full day, go ahead and uncheck that box. It'll help you validate attendance codes. The second one is if the code is considered present for Ohio State reporting. So perhaps a field trip, perhaps college visits, any other sort of off-site activities that do count for attendance, you'd want to code that way. The third box is if they should not count toward truancy, but they do count towards chronic absenteeism. So for the most part, I believe that's out of school suspensions. There could be some other examples as well. I just can't think of any off the top of my head. The last box is technically obsolete for Ohio State reporting reasons. However, you can still use this to track things locally if that's helpful to you. And that can be used generally for medically excused absences. So if folks still want to track that, still would like to be able to query it for letters or for notification purposes, you are able to, since people usually already have those codes broken up. Okay, that's it in a nutshell. I'll hand it back over to Stephanie.
Okay, so next up, we want to take a look at the attendance conversions. So the first thing that we want to look at here is the FTE defined? So what that means is, does every code have a value assigned to it? If not, then this will affect the ADA, ADM reports, object reports, and the meta report card. So it's very important that, that you see defined on this page. So you'll see here on this one, it says partial 11 out of 12. So that indicates that one of our codes does not have a value assigned. So if we click on that, we can see here at the bottom, the field trip, it does not have a value entered. So we would want to make sure that we add that there. Any present or any code that is a present code, you would want to have a 1 in there, and then the absent codes would have a 0 in there. So this is super important for EMIS, accurate attendance, and your reporting information to make sure that these are all filled out. So if we added our value for the field trip and then submitted, and then went back to our conversions page, then we would see that that says defined. Next, we want to make sure that we have our full-time equivalency set. So if we click on that full-time hyperlink, we can review that we have the correct mode attached. Again, that is very important for your attendance calculations. We also want to make sure that all of the grade levels here are checked. Oftentimes, if we see an issue with attendance, there could be a grade level that's not checked, and so attendance would not be calculating correctly for those grades. Yeah, so if you needed to, you could check those and then hit submit to update.
We wanted to kind of shift gears, but talk about bell schedules and specifically as they relate to attendance. Obviously, as we all know, Ohio calculates attendance in hours. So we want to make sure that on all bell schedules in each building, that we are accurately accounting for instructional time. This can especially cause concerns for partial day attendance when the bell schedule is really crucial to calculating partial day absences and hours missed of instructional time. So we wanted to go over some sort of best practices in bell schedules. Obviously, bell schedules look different from school to school, and especially from an elementary level to a secondary level. But there's some things that we've seen across the board, and we wanted to make sure that you were aware of PowerSchool's best practice recommendations to avoid any issues with attendance calculations moving forward. So just have a sample bell schedule here that I'm going to use to talk through some of these examples. Highlighted here is what is known as the bridge period. We also call it the daily attendance period. It is the period within your day where you will be counting for daily attendance. And let me go back because I wanted to mention another generic note about bell schedules. Obviously, they're building specific, and essentially you're just putting times to your periods of the day. Most school buildings will have more than one bell schedule. So whether that's a 2-hour delay or a pep rally or assembly schedule, basically any day where the order in which you go to your periods or the times in which you go to your periods deviate from a regular scheduled day. But that being said, you can only have one bell schedule per building per day. And we'll talk about that when we look at the calendar. Let's see. So again, the daily attendance period, which is highlighted here in this example bell schedule, is especially important as it relates to calculating those partial day attendance. Another piece that is important in that bell schedule is your lunches. So I've highlighted in blue here, and again, this is going to look different from school to school, but lunches are particularly important in how they're called out in a bell schedule. They must be recognized as a lunch period because we do not want those minutes to be counted as missed instructional time. So in other words, the lunch courses that are scheduled into these periods must be marked to exclude from attendance calculations so that on those partial day absences, when the system looks to the bell schedule to see how many instructional hours the students missed, it has a lunch period in there to not include in those attendance calculations. So this is where we're just getting into some pretty basic best practices recommended by PowerSchool and some things that we've seen that can cause issues with those partial day attendance calculations. So the first of those is what I've called the 5-minute rule. So periods should be at least 5 minutes to be or must be at least 5 minutes to be shown in the bell schedule view or on the edit meeting attendance page. And if you have a separate period for daily attendance, like this example here, they have called out specifically that ATT daily attendance period. That particularly make sure that that is at least 5 minutes to properly calculate daily attendance. So it's perfectly okay, and many schools have a separate attendance period that is not a typical course wouldn't be scheduled in there, and they just have an attendance course. But even that period must be at least 5 minutes. I've seen schools with 1-minute periods, 4-minute periods. Really want to make sure that that is 5 minutes so that PowerSchool always recognizes that as a true period within the day. This next piece is not necessarily going to cause attendance issues, but is, while we're on the subject of bell schedule, something that we always recommend, and that is how to handle gaps in between periods. So if you are creating a new bell schedule or revamping an old one, this is how we would recommend you handle those gaps in between periods. So there shouldn't be any time in between each period. The end time of one period to the next time, the start time of the next period. So you can see here, the ATT period starts at 7:40. The next period, period 1, begins at 7:41. That is how we would recommend setting up the times in your bell schedule for a couple reasons. It just looks the cleanest, and especially if you rely on that Find Me alert, you want to make sure that if you have a gap, if you had a gap in between those two periods, it could cause issues with that Find Me alert to work as expected. So this is more just of a recommendation. If you're making adjustments as you're building new or adjusting bell schedules, this is what we would recommend. Okay, so when possible, and this is something I say that because this is not something that we would say revamp an entire bell schedule for. And again, it's not necessarily something that's going to cause major attendance issues, but it can help, especially when troubleshooting attendance issues. And that is paying attention to the internal period of your bell schedule. And this can get it's a little two-step sort of check on this one because what I've pulled here is actually from the periods table. And I didn't include the pathway there, so I should have done that. But you can find the periods table under school management, scheduling, and then periods. And this will show on the left-hand side there the internal number of the period, and that's that static value that doesn't change. You can't change. It just is what the system identifies as the internal period. Whereas that external name and abbreviation, the abbreviation specifically is what you will see on a student schedule, on the Bell schedule. So in this example, this is corresponding to that same Bell schedule we were looking at, that ATT period, and which is the first period of their day, and the Bell schedule is internal period 1. So you can't see an internal period on the Bell schedule. You can on the periods table. And again, this is just something that if you were building a new Bell schedule, we would recommend. The next couple things we're going to talk about have to do with that bridge or daily attendance period. And most buildings, I would say, are doing this, but just as a reminder, that bridge period or daily attendance period should fall within that default time in and time out of your day. So again, that default time in and time out is assigned only on that daily attendance period. When you check that box that says you want to use this for daily attendance, it will then prompt you to enter in your in and out times. And your bridge period should fall, the times of that bridge period should fall within that wider range. So both examples here are correct. The first example is just using that separate bridge period separate from a normal class period. Theirs still falls within that 7:35 to 2:30 range. The second example, their bridge period or daily attendance period is their first period course, which is also perfectly acceptable. And that time falls within 7:30 to 2:30 as well. Kind of in the same vein, but a different recommendation or best practice is to make sure that you have your the entire range of the default time in to default time out accounted for by periods in the Bell schedule. So looking at that default time in to time out is 7:35 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And then we can see that we have periods that account for the entire time here on the left-hand side. It starts at 7:35, the first period, and the last period ends at 2:30. So just making sure that those match up. This is a biggie, and one that I would say we've seen more than one issue with calculating partial day attendance due to this setup in the Bell schedule. And that has to do with the bridge period and courses associated with it, and the bridge period and overlapping with other periods. So the first point here is that the bridge period or daily attendance period should never have more than one course associated to it. So another way to think about that is a student should not be enrolled in 2 courses within the bridge period. Like I said, we've had more than one instance this year where that has caused issues with that partial day attendance calculation. Sometimes it's just a couple minutes, but as you know, a couple minutes per student per partial day attendance can really add up. So making sure that for your bridge period, every student should be enrolled in a course in that bridge period, but every student should only be enrolled in one course in that bridge period. So similarly, the bridge period should not overlap in time with other Bell schedule periods. This is especially true if you take meeting attendance or at those secondary levels, depending on if you're at an elementary building, depending on how your Bell schedule is set up, there could be an exception to this. But in general, especially in those middle and high schools, the bridge period should not overlap in time with other Bell schedule periods. And just as a note, I know this seems really small, but if I go back to my example, let me go back to actually similarly to this no gaps in between periods. The overlap can be as simple as starting and ending in the same minute. So if this ATT period ended at 7:40 and first period started at 7:40, that is technically considered an overlap. So you would want to avoid that and have your next period start at 7:41 or whenever the next minute would be.
We're just trying to help districts. The scheduling team has gone through and looking at the bell schedules. There has been an email sent out if we would recommend you having a team help you look through your bell schedules. I understand that, I know Denise had said they've had an overlap for years. I completely understand that. One time it may just decide that it's not going to calculate correctly. I had that with 3 districts last year where even though it had worked for years, last year it just decided not to calculate any of their information correctly. So we're trying to alleviate those issues before they happen. So if we can have you have your bell schedule set up correctly, so then that way we don't learn in October or November that your minutes will not calculate correctly because of your bell schedule not being set up correct. So we're just trying to head this off before we get into school, because once your bell schedule has attendance associated to it, then we can't go back. You have to create a whole new bell schedule. Any questions on that?
I have a question. This is Denise still on the.
Sure. Yeah, let me
So-
turn my mic up just a little bit, Denise.
Okay.
I'm sorry, my speakers. Go for it.
Okay. So it's my middle school that we're questioning, and we have an ATT attendance in the bell schedule for 5 minutes, but so its time is from 9 a.m. to 9:05. But first period, and that's the one that says yes to counts to ADA and yes for attendance. That's the one that has the default times in and out used for daily attendance. And then we have first period, but it also starts at 9 a.m. and then goes for 53 minutes. So from what I'm hearing, this is certainly not the preferred method.
Correct. First period should start at 9:06. So it could duplicate attendance. So if you have a student that's in multiple, what PowerSchool would consider periods at the same time, it may not realize which period to associate the attendance with. So we'd be happy, Denise, if you want to put a ticket in, we can roll through that with you and just go through scenarios and explain that a lot more in depth, if that would help.
Okay, and I totally get what you're saying if we just change our start time for period 1, because I'm thinking this affects the schedule, this is like a big deal, and we start school in a week. But if I just change the bell schedule to start after, it's not a big deal. So,
Correct.
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think you gave me an aha moment that I guess I should have figured out myself, but thank you.
Oh, no, I love providing those moments. Yep.
So again, just want to make sure that those, you pay particular attention to your bridge period and how it appears in your bell schedule. Okay. We're going to talk for a second, or Emis is going to talk about tracks.
Okay, this is Helen again for those on the Zoom. We get a lot of questions about tracks, and I'm going to be honest. I think a lot of times people are overthinking the track situation. So just my 2 cents. This is a very simple decision tree to help you guys kind of think about if you need them, and if you do, how many or when you would need them. So the first thing to remember about tracks is that they are per building. We hear a lot of people say, oh, I only have so many I can use and I'm out. And so a lot of times people are looking at that throughout the whole district, but that's not the case. It's per building. So that's the first thing to remember. They're very customizable. There's going to be reasons why I'll suggest creating a new track, and you guys may have more other applicable reasons to do so. I always suggest starting with the attendance patterns. If you have two attendance patterns, you should probably have a track for each of those attendance patterns. That's the simplest way. There could be some instances within those attendance patterns that, again, you may determine you need more than that. So at the end of the day, my EMIS recommendation is 1 track per attendance pattern per building. So we've provided just a couple of examples. I'll read through the first one for you, but you can see the other one on the slide. If you have a high school and maybe only 11th graders attend when they take the ACT, this is a common one. You would want the default for 9th and 10th grade to be on track A. And then I've just made up these attendance patterns. So just, go with it here. Say 11th grade, A1 could be on track B. And then you also have seniors that get out 3 days early. So we'll say we have a 12 S1 attendance pattern as well. You could use track C for it. The next example is based on elementary. And again, remember, I said these are by building. So these examples could be the same district. You use track A for one thing in the elementary and you use track A for another thing in the high school. So those are the EMIS just suggestions when it comes to tracks. Use them when you need them. Don't overdo it. And when in doubt, feel free to let us know. Okay. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Core for more attendance calendar.
Okay, so calendars talked about at a few of our core PowerSchool trainings, but just wanted to touch on it quickly here as it relates to attendance. Obviously, you have the date there on the left. For cycle days, even if you are a one-day school, meaning that your students go to the same classes every single day of the week, you still will need to have a cycle day entered there on your calendar. So if you're a one-day school, you're going to be A days all the way down. If you use cycle days, that's where those would be designated here on the calendar. This is where you also have your bell schedule designated. So like in this example, they're going to have regular bell schedule for most of their school days. But if there is, let's say, a 2-hour delay and you have a 2-hour delay bell schedule, this is where on your calendar you would make that adjustment on the date, and your day would reflect that 2-hour delay bell schedule. School in session, that one's pretty straightforward. You'll want to have that box checked as well as a membership value for your in-session days. Tracks, again, Helen just talked about tracks, and this is where on the calendar you would identify which tracks are in session. So if on that ACT day, let's say your 11th graders who do not take the ACT and do not have to report to school that day are on the B track, they would not be checked for that day. Type is there's 2 types, and EMIS is going to talk about that EMIS type there on the right next. But for the core side, that type is a field just used to identify the type of out of session day. So a holiday or a calamity day, for example. And I am going to turn it over to Alexandra to talk about EMIS type.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to go over your EMIS attributes. So typically these will carry over from year to year, but if you have any new EMIS attributes, then you'll need to create those. The new element for the kindergarten staggered start is already in there, so you don't have to create that. One thing I want to point out, for days where you have staff doing something different than your students, you'll need 2 elements, one for the student and one for the staff. So say there's a PD day, you need the element for the PD with the hours for the staff, and those will go at the bottom for the attribute hours, and then a second element for the students to show they weren't in session that day. And then the same for a shortened day. Make sure your hours are accurate. You don't need 2 elements unless the staff are coming in on time and the students are doing a shortened day. So here is the new kindergarten staggered start element. It is already entered. You'll want to use the earliest start date for your DL, and that is a EMIS term for those of you who are not aware. And that's the only one that you're going to enter. When you make your attendance patterns, the same as when you have seniors who are out earlier, that's where you're at all of your extra dates. So say A through L comes one day, and then N through Z comes the next day. Those will be entered on your attendance pattern, but you'll use the A through L for your DL element. And then also make sure you are going through each calendar for each building to edit your EMIS calendar exceptions.
We have they have the KG code in their membership type.
So you should have it as an option. If you don't see it as an option, it was added with the last release a couple of weeks ago. But if you don't see it as an option to enter, then please put in a ticket. All right, we'll turn it back over.
Okay, so as you can see, this page is extremely busy. But just so you get an idea of all the different things that affect attendance, you have over here on the enrollment, is your FTE chosen? Your FTE is what takes you back to your conversions. Then you have your point values down here. Everything goes together. You're on your calendar, your bell schedule, and over here is your bell schedule. And that goes down to your conversion as well. So when we're troubleshooting attendance, these are just some of the items that we're going to look up. Are your codes set up correctly? Are your conversions defined? As Stephanie explained, it's extremely important your conversions are defined. For your FTEs, are your students marked correctly for an FTE? A lot of times we see transferred in students. If you've added a grade to a building that was not previously added last year, you want to make sure that that grade is check marked. And then is there a bell schedule list for the day on the calendar? If you've changed your bell schedules from last year, you want to make sure that those are updated. Then just a reminder, the mass update daily attendance page. This page is a wonderful tool, but it does exactly what it says it does. So please make sure your users know how to use this page correctly. We did install some warnings in this a year and a half ago, I think it was. This is not a report. You are changing attendance for all of the selected students. So this can wipe out your entire building's attendance. So please make sure before anyone is using this page that they know how to use it correctly. It will show you if you've selected a large amount of students or multiple days, it's going to show you how many records are being changed. So make sure that that is there. And then you have to check mark that button before you are able to submit this change. So lots of safeguards on this page for you. And then attendance management. So how does attendance actually work? Your meeting is going to take their meeting or period attendance in their grade book. And then if that is your bridge period that you have designated on your bell schedule, that is going to bridge over to your daily attendance period. And then your office staff can go in there and they can update your code as appropriate. And then the admin, as long as you have that code set up correctly, the admin is going to override. So teachers cannot go back in and change a code once it's been set. And then just a little bit about the attendance overview page, because I know this page can get pretty confusing. So if you want to change the code, you're going to click on the actual day initial. And then that is going to bring up the box for you to update your code in your comment. Then if you want to enter a time, you will click on the clock. And then your clock is going to allow you to put in your time information and then what we would call a time comment. So if you have a partial day, you're going to put in your times and you're going to put in your comments. And then you can also put in dual entries for time. Only one code for the day, but you can put in multiple time entries. So if you're going to do that, you can click on your other time information and you can update it. So I had another one at 10:47 and I wanted to change that to noon. It'll show you down at the bottom too. So you have your view on the front page, but then down here at the bottom, it's going to show all of your entries that you've put. And then we also have this explain button right here. That's just going to show a breakdown of your minutes per period. That's more of a tool that we kind of use just to make sure that things are calculating correctly, but we can also show how to use that more in depth. We won't get into it this training just since it's an overview.
And then just some things to remember about your daily attendance. So attendance belongs to the building that the student is enrolled in. So if a student transfers building, that attendance is going to stay with the previous enrollment, and then they're going to have new attendance in their new building. So staff, if they don't have the ability to view in the previous building, they will not see it other than on the daily attendance info page. They can still see the previous building's attendance information. And then core PowerSchool, there are the values for points, but Ohio calculates hours. So the points come into play when it is the ADA, ADM, but not so much when it comes to hours. So Ohio is going to look at the hours value. They're not going to be worried about your conversion values. And then if your student's attendance is not calculating correctly, please check their FTE. Make sure their FTE is set up correctly. Are there any other students that are having the same issue, a similar issue? These are all things that'll help us. And then just notify your district leader if you're having any kind of an issue, and they can submit a ticket on that. And that is the last I've got. You have more? Okay.
Yeah, but can I share?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Beth, I'm sorry. Did you ask your question out loud?
I did. Can you hear me?
Now I can, yes. If you can
Okay.
please.
So we have our kindergartners starting, staggering start on the 24th and 25th, but our school actually starts on August 20th with some parent meetings for the kindergarten parents. So on the calendar, would I just put the EMIS code on the 24th and 25th? Because I don't know how to report this.
What's the
Because the
earliest
kids aren't
day?
starting when the traditional kids are.
It's the first day of school, or start date for.
Does that make sense?
Earliest start date was 25th, 26th, but you said you have parent meetings the 20th?
Yeah, so we have parent meetings for kindergarten parents on the 20th and 21st, and then the kindergartners will stagger start the 24th and 25th based on alphabet.
Okay, so the DL is gonna start the 25th. I
So-
hope I'm remembering.
Well, so should that was my next question. So on the DL for kindergarten, they really should be the first day of school, the 24th,
Yes.
even though everybody else is starting the 20th?
Yes.
Okay, all right, got it.
Good deal.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions that were asked other than through chat? Okay, we'll let Helen go ahead then with the EMIS portion.
Okay, so we just went over how to set up everything in your PowerSchool environment so that attendance will calculate correctly. And why do we want attendance to calculate correctly, right? One, so we can report accurately to the state, and two, so we can fulfill our requirements to make sure students are attending school the way they're legally required to. So within PowerSchool, we're now going to cover the truancy and chronic absenteeism summary page. This is where it gets a little open-ended. Okay, I can tell you what the page does. I can tell you some general recommendations, but every district policy is going to be looking for different thresholds here. So we're going to have to digest what I'm saying, maybe jot down some notes, and then at the end we can talk through how does this look for me, for real. Okay. So I'm in last year because there's no attendance data to look at yet for this year. So just bear with me on that. This page, let me back up. You can access this page by selecting a group of students, and then in the group functions down under Ohio State information, we're in the truancy and chronic absenteeism summary. When you click the button to go to the report, it starts running the report. So if you're following along, maybe grab a small subset of students. I tried to, but I forgot. So it'll load here in a moment. And I did all of last year as well. Okay. So by default, the start date is going to be 7/1 of the fiscal year that you're in, and the end date is going to be today. That works out fine for me because it's still summer. So you can adjust these dates if you'd like to. Some people want to look at just Q1. Some people just want to look at semester 1, whatever you're looking at there. But the end date, it cannot go past today. So we don't project attendance. Okay, this took me about 100 times to actually see this setting in here. But if you read the sentence, the second one says you can edit these values here. If you click that here, this is where you're going to see your district truancy default preferences. Okay, I see a lot of ohs happening in the room. Okay, this is how I understand the page. You guys know usually Susan would do this. You get the second best, which is you get my understanding, which is a little bit more casual than Susan's. Let's say that. So here's the deal. This second metric here is what's going to drive your truancy excused absences per hours threshold here. So you see this numerator here is 38. That aligns with my district default. So let's think about how we do this in practice, right? How many excused hours per year could require notification for your district? That's kind of the question there. You might have that be 5%, 10%. Whatever, I don't know. It might be just some arbitrary number. That's where you're going to change that denominator. I hope I said that correctly earlier. Now here, this fourth one down, total absence hours that might require notification. That's really where I'm thinking you guys are going to end up with your 5% thresholds. Total hours absent per year, regardless of reason. That's where you're going to set this threshold for the whole district. Remember, if I change these here, every user in my district is going to see those now as the denominators on this report. The rest of them I'm really not going to speak on, to be honest. We can look at those in the work help session or in tickets if you guys need it. But again, the big takeaways I wanted to share with you is that those two settings is how you set these denominators here for the first two chronic absenteeism thresholds. Okay, the rest of what we're seeing on this report, total possible hours, that's how many hours the student could have attended. And the total year absence percentage is based on total possible hours. So those are all just there to help you, hopefully. If you don't like them, just ignore them. That's fine. But they're just metrics to make the data analysis a little bit easier for you. Okay, so we talked about setting the denominator. I should have that on like a Post-it note in front of me because I'm getting confused. Let's talk about these numerators here. Up at the top is where we're going to start saying, okay, the threshold is 38. When do I want them to start showing on the report? Because I don't want to wait until they've already passed their threshold, right? We want to know they're on the way so we can start talking to them about it. That's where you save these here. This is per user. So elementary can have it one way, high school can have it one way. Me and Alexandra can have it different because we have different beliefs. I don't know. So just know that as we start to talk to our district personnel, start to really hone out our systems here. I would really only, for the most part, the only numbers that would have changed because of House Bill 96 would be the top 4 here. The rest of them down at the bottom are truancy. So in my opinion, I don't think those would have changed much for districts. So revisit these here for your district. And then within the the report page itself, sit down with each building, determine what the recommended settings are for your notification requirements. Okay, I could spend probably a good 2 hours talking about the 2 pages I'm going to go over, but they put me at the end. I don't want everybody to fall asleep, so we'll just keep going over it as an overview. We just covered the absence. Wait, hang on. We just covered the absence column. Now you can look at kind of the truancy column. These are really, my understanding, mostly for your local use, where you're just making sure the habitual truancy, following up with students, and those local practices. And again, those thresholds are set using both the district defaults and the notification thresholds. So you will also see, it gets a little weird because I'm in last year, but the most recent action, they might not have any in here, but we used to have to actually report absence intervention to the state. We don't have to anymore. But that area is still available for local use if you'd like to track your interventions or anything else related to absence tracking. So the most recent one will show up here in this column if there are any. And then you'll also see if there are notes, you'll get a yes or a no. Well, you'll just get a yes. If there's nothing, you get nothing. Yeah, they can ask. I think I should be able to hear them.
Hi, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, I think you had your hand up first.
Yeah, hi. Ty Long with Kettering City Schools. I'm the truancy officer here. I appreciate you going through the total absence pieces there. I know that we are all kind of working with the new processes inside the old system. But is there anything being developed? Because the things that are required from the school side are prior to 5%, a letter going out of chronic absenteeism. Prior to 10%, students are assigned to an absence intervention team. And so those are really the 2 big data tracking points that districts need. And then as far as the unexcused hours, those thresholds, you are correct, have stayed the same, 30 consecutive, 42 in a month, and 72 unexcused in a year. And that's when you would work with your local juvenile court jurisdiction. Are there any plans to kind of make it fit that model better? And again, I know we're all working with what we got.
Sure. I really appreciate your question and your clarification. I should have had my video on so you could see me wipe the sweat off my forehead that I got that correct. So the question is, in practice, I have to notify at 5%, right? And I need to make sure that's happening. If it were me, I would suggest setting these thresholds here. So maybe you set your total absence hours down here at whatever, I don't know, let's just say 10% for my math. We could say 100 hours here is when
we're going to use 30 if that helps out.
30. Okay, great.
30
so you
hours.
Could put 30 hours right in here in the total absence hours that would require notification. And then what you can do is come over to this page, which I didn't actually change it because it's going to like refresh the whole thing. Then you can come here and knock that down to maybe 20. When do you want to start knowing these kids are getting close to that threshold? Or if you also want it to be 30, they can match. And then that will cause the students, the number that you put here turns them yellow on the report down here. Okay, so if you want them to start popping up showing that they may need notification, you want to put that number right here. And then they will, out of, I would say 30 is your denominator for all these 30 here is your denominator for the notification threshold, just so those kids are always on your radar. Now, this report is only going to allow you to query those students, right? So the next step you're asking about is the letters, which are just going to put a pin in for a second, but we will get back to that. Does that help at all explain how you can use this report to track your local hours that you're looking for?
It does. And again, this isn't on you guys. The broader thing is, there's that second piece where prior to 10%, students have to be assigned to an absence intervention team. We really don't have any way to track that within PowerSchool at that moment, as of now.
What I will tell you is that we have, unfortunately, I don't have a text box open that I can actually demonstrate this demonstrate right now for you. However, we've kind of opened up that FT, if you remember where we used to report that information, where districts can locally define their absence interventions. So you have to forgive me, I don't know what absence intervention looks like in real life, but let's say it's Mr. G talk to the kids, you can enter that information there. And then you will see that on this report. You would be able to see at least that action was taken. I know that right now I'm just describing it, so it's probably hard to visualize. However, before this is over, I will at least throw some screenshots in there so you guys can know what I'm talking about. Or we can stay on at the end and kind of talk about it in depth. Thank you. The other enhancement to the absence intervention. Sorry, give me 1 second.
Something into that?
Yeah, let me just finish this thought before I forget. The other enhancement to the absence intervention page is that you can now add them in bulk. Okay, that should be a big deal. So before you had to send a letter, enter, save, go to the next kid, enter, save. Now you can grab all the kids that you sent your letters to, group select, add it. I'm assuming you're sending them on the same day. If not, I would suggest it. So, okay, go ahead and add your additional thing, please.
I was going to say that just as she mentioned, you can put that into the code set. You can assign them the absent intervention team. So it's however you set up your code sets, and then the sections that she's describing, the last 3 columns, you can list what intervention you're providing the student. So if a letter was sent, if you've made a call to the family, if you've set up the intervention plan, and then that's how you're going to track them on the current system.
Thank you so much for adding that.
Hey, Helen.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a slightly alternative suggestion if you don't care on the filter area on this page.
Totally.
So if you click on the plus, yep, and then that first drop down, you're gonna get, and Tyler, I think this might help you and what you were looking for. I really like the total absence hours per year option. And then I would say greater than or equal to, I think you said you're going to use 30. And then I would hit the apply button, and this is going to bring up the specific kids, and there's no trying to look through red and orange and green and whatever. Like, these are the kids who have 30 or more total absence hours for the school year. That's how I'm training my secretaries this afternoon, is like, these are your kids right here. Like, and I think you can scroll to the bottom of the page and make them your current selection, and you can work with that group. You could also use it when they hit the 10%, if that's 91 or 100 or whatever your hours are. You can find those kids that way as well.
Thank you. That's good stuff.
There's also filtering on the action notes, and like whether you have, there's action notes. Yep. So you can say yes or no, like if those are there, but also just actions. So like if you say, these 5 kids got a 5% at-risk letter already, those would show on your screen as well. And you would know that you don't have to worry about those kids. But this is another filter that you can apply depending on what your code set looks like.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for everybody's thoughts here. Honestly, I wish there was a way that we could just say, this is how you all do it, but there isn't. And it is very much taking what we have and how does it apply to your district. So again, thank you so much for those suggestions. We love to hear how it's working for you guys and what's making it easier. So the other thing down here at the bottom, an enhancement, previously, if you're a really large district, we'd have issues where it takes a million years to load the report. If you want to download it, you can queue it as a CSV. So you can download the report. I think it provides the actual notes, not just a yes or a no. So you feel free to use that as you see fit as well. Hang on, I'm reading the chat. I'm reading. Okay. Yeah. So the code sets, they, sorry, I have a lot of things going on in my brain right now. This is where you can set up those attendance actions. Absence action taken. I can't because this one's out of, I will on Devo 5 in a minute. What's the other question? Okay. Oh, okay. The handouts are in here in the meta documentation. All right, now I have to find my train of thought and then we'll resume. Okay, for now we're going to move on from the summary screen and we're going to talk about the student screen. I guess I probably should have done the student screen first, but oh well. We're in last year. Okay. So we just went over how to summarize attendance information for a group of students. But if we want to look at an individual student, we're going to use the truancy and chronic absenteeism detail page to view virtually the same data points we just saw in the summary, but a little more in depth. Okay, so this banner here at the top is, again, basically those exact same columns that were on the report, but this is just straight data. There's no denominator. It's just exactly the information you see here. Then you'll be able to see a list of student absences. So the absences that are calculating into these numbers you're seeing. Staff notes, if applicable. And then again, this is a test database. Things have changed since what I'm looking at. So it'll show just a little differently on your screens. This is where you'll see those absence interventions, which we don't report anymore, but they're still very important for local information. So it's like obsolete, but not really. So down here is where you can start adding those interventions. Choose your parent called. Then you also have the, I don't really know. Are you guys still using the EMIS reportable ones just for fun? Or are you just using? Yeah, okay. I don't have any guidance. I was just curious. But so this is where you can add those events for the students. Now, I mentioned that it's been enhanced, but I'm looking at an old environment. We have our group of students. If that group is the same as if that group of students receive the same absence intervention, there's a new button in here that says submit for selected students and continue. So if I remember, I'll show you when I get to my other box. But just so you know, that is there to make it easier to add those. Okay. All right. There is one other thing I wanted to show you guys because we've talked a lot about how just different districts have different needs. I'm the kind of person where I love a good report. I can look at it all day, but I just want the data. You know, I want it raw. I want to mess with it and make my own report. So recently, the PSSR team has been able to put out a DAT Builder. Now, I'm very excited about this. I hope I'm not the only one, but if you tried to write a DAT, data access tag for attendance, previously it might make you want to cry because it can be a little complex. So now we're just going to take away that pain point and you can actually generate the DAT that you want to run. Okay, so again, what does that look like in real life? Let's say someone says to me, Helen, how many hours did Johnny miss medically absent in Q1? Those are the kind of questions that make my heart start racing. But now we can answer them pretty easily. So you could just walk through the questions here. If you're looking for present hours, how do you want them? In hours and minutes or in decimal? I'm just going to leave it how it is for now. I don't want any student information. I'm going to handle that on my own. Now, here we can choose what dates. Do we want the current school year or a custom date range? So again, that's where those questions about certain quarters, semesters, periods of time, this is where it really comes in handy. I'm not actually going to do it, but I could put Q1 start and end dates in there. For now, I'll leave it as the current school year. Now, you can see up here too, it's also kind of previewing what you're going to get returned. 12:30. So if you're happy with that, you can go to next, and then you can just copy the query and put it in your quick export report or your list of students. That was a very quick explanation, but this is going to come in really handy, guys, and I encourage you to kind of play with them. When people, you can't break it, copy it, and quick export it with your student data, see if it matches what you were looking for, and if not, go back and start over. Oh yeah, you guys want to know how to get there? Fair enough, fair enough. Data and reporting, exports, and then you could go into the Ohio DAT Builder. That's why you're all so engaged in the screen. You couldn't see it yourself. So this all is related to Ohio attendance law as it stands today. If you scroll down, you can see some of the old stuff. I don't recommend doing that. Are there any questions, any comments that are nice? No, I'm just kidding. Any questions in the room that you want to address with the group? No? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, if you go back to the truancy chronic absenteeism.
The summary?
Yeah, the
Absolutely.
separate threshold.
I didn't make my student selection any smaller.
Sorry,
No, I'm sorry. One of these days I'll learn,
but I can.
Sure, go ahead.
So our district has decided to go with the 3% warning, so we understand, like, we're primarily focusing in on the 3 and 4.
Yes.
Yeah.
These two.
Yeah, and so yeah, primarily that, yeah. So the issue that we're running into is that, well, one, so if I'm understanding this right, so we have a high school, we have a middle school, and we have 5 K through 5.
Yeah. Oh.
And so we will have to, depending on those hours established, high school and middle school are the same in terms of the threshold we're setting, but K through 5 is different. So we have to require that any attendance clerk at that school would have to set that threshold on their computer, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, the other problem though that we are running into is our kindergarten AM and PM. So will it pick up the flag, or are we recommending that they would sort and just know who the kindergarten, their AM and PM, and provide them with the thresholds? Does that make sense?
It does. So let me just repeat the questions for the Zoom real quick and we'll address them. The first question / comment was, okay, I can set these thresholds for the district, but I have 5 schools with different thresholds. And that's a valid point. These are set at the district. So you'll have to set a default for the district, and then each user can go in and set their local thresholds should those differ at buildings. The second question is about half-day kindergarten. And The answer to that question depends on how your kindergarten is set up. And we can absolutely talk about that a little bit. I'm assuming it might get weird though, depending on how they're actually attending.
It's set up in such a way is that, for EMIS purposes, you have to
Have a full day calendar.
Yeah, you have to have a
Mhm.
full day calendar. And so what we do is we identify it through our percent of time.
50%.
Yeah, so we're
It's
just
like-
wondering if those kids will show up as a marker. I don't think they.
I don't think they will either, as long as things are set correct.
Yeah.
Attendance is being taken as expected.
Yeah, we can.
Mhm.
But, so I'm assuming this, my guess is that for those students, they would just have to store. They wouldn't necessarily show up on the flag.
Right. The other thing you could do is select just your kindergartners.
Yeah.
Have that building personnel run it, and they could even change if they needed to update the threshold if it's different just for that group. So you have tons of options, which can be overwhelming. It's a blessing and a curse. Okay, so I think other than individual scenarios, it seems like we've covered most of the content on our agenda for today. I'm going to stop sharing and mute my mic, and I'll let whoever wants to take it over from the core team do that.
So the last question was, the district thresholds are set. Then if a school updates those thresholds, will the new school thresholds, will those be updated at the district level? And the answer is no, because only certain users are going to even have access. So you're not going to have, only certain users will only have access to update those thresholds. So you need to check your security groups or the rules, who has the access for that. That wraps up our attendance training for today. If you have any more questions stemming from this, please absolutely feel free to put in a ticket. We'll be more than happy to work on questions with you. And if not, we hope everyone has a great start of the school year.